The valley had always been quiet at dusk, the kind of silence that felt ancient, as though even the wind respected the land's age and refused to disturb it. But on this particular evening, as Elias Rourke trudged from one side of his ranch to the other, there was a heaviness in the air, like the world was holding its breath. Elias didn't notice it at first. His mind was too crowded with worry, and his body too tired from a day of work that never seemed to end. The fences needed mending, the cattle were thinning, the fields yielded less each year, and the banker had reminded him yet again that he had less than 3 weeks to pay off his debts before everything would be seized. He wiped his dusty brow and leaned against the crooked fence, staring at his land, the land his father had passed to him. "I'm trying, Pa," he whispered to the empty fields, "but I don't know how much longer I can hold on." The sky above him glowed a dim blue as evening settled, the last rays of sunlight spilling across the horizon. It was a calm, tired sort of light, the kind that makes a man think of sleep more than supper. Elias kicked the dry ground with the toe of his boot, then turned toward the barn to store his tools. That's when the world shattered. A thunderous crack like mountains breaking split the air. Elias spun around, heart lunging into his throat. The sky wasn't dark anymore. It was glowing, burning. A streak of blinding blue fire tore across it, slicing through the quiet heavens like a wounded star. The ground trembled beneath him. Horses neighed wildly in their corral. Chickens scattered in every direction, and even the old barn groaned as though the blast had shaken its bones. "What in God's holy name?" Elias whispered. The flaming streak plummeted, crashing into the ravine beyond his wheat fields. A burst of wind slammed into Elias, nearly knocking him over. His lantern fell into the dirt. For a second, everything was silent again, shockingly silent, as though nature itself was stunned. Elias's breath dragged and sharp and uneven. Curiosity warred with fear, but fear wasn't something that had ever stopped him. He picked up his lantern, lit it, and hurried toward the ravine. The night grew hotter as he approached. Ash floated like glowing snowflakes, settling on his shoulders and hair. The bushes and grass were singed black, and the air smelled of smoke, iron, and something strange, something otherworldly. He crouched near the edge of the ravine and raised the lantern. At first he saw only a long, scorched path carved into the earth. But then he spotted movement. A shape, massive, trembling. His heart hammered. It wasn't a stone. It wasn't a tree. It was a body, a giant's body. A tremor ran through Elias's arms. Giants existed in old tales, in legends told around campfires, in the imaginations of children who liked to pretend the clouds were footpaths for beings who lived above storms. But here, right here, was a giant lying in front of him, half buried in smoking dirt. A real one, he whispered. The giant groaned softly, yet the vibration rippled through the soil and up his legs. She was enormous, easily 20 feet tall, maybe more. Her hair spilled in silver waves over cracked rocks. Her skin glimmered faintly, like moonlight on polished stone. The armor she wore, strange, ornate, glowing at the edges, was unlike anything he'd ever seen, carved with swirling runes and symbols that shifted like living patterns. Then Elias noticed the wound. A deep gash ran along her leg, glowing faintly with blue light. Blood dripped slowly, bright luminous droplets that dimmed as they hit the ground. He swallowed hard. "Easy, easy. I'm not here to hurt you." The giant's eyes fluttered open. Amber light shone within them like tiny sunsets trapped behind her lashes. She looked at him, confused, frightened, weak. "Please, hide me." Her voice was a whisper, but it echoed, a soft thunder that seemed to vibrate in the air. Elias blinked in disbelief.
"Hide you?"
From what? That's when he heard it. Thud, 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 thud. The ground trembled again, but not from the fallen giant. Elias raised his lantern toward the distant ridge. Torches flickered like a line of moving stars, and the silhouettes of riders grew clearer with each passing second. The High Chief's riders, known for hunting magical beings, known for their brutality, known for never showing mercy. Elias's breath stilled. They were riding fast, straight toward his ranch, toward this ravine. He looked back at the wounded giant princess. She whispered again, voice strained. "They will bind me, cage me, take what I protect, please." Elias's instincts battled within him. Logic screamed at him to run, to hide, to save himself. But something deeper, a stubborn, quiet compassion, rose higher than fear. He stepped toward her. "All right. If you trust me, I'll help." The giant's head rested back against the dirt as relief softened her expression. Elias climbed down into the ravine, his muscles burning with effort, and tugged at her massive arm. It took everything he had to help her stand. Even half-conscious, she was impossibly heavy, every step shaking the ground. But his will was stronger than his strength. He guided her toward the far side of the fields where an old, abandoned storage barn stood, a place no one visited anymore. Its roof sagged, its walls leaned like tired men, and dust coated everything inside. But it was hidden, dark and sturdy, perfect for hiding a giant. Once inside, Elias gathered every blanket and sack of hay he could find, covering her vast body layer by layer until she blended with the dim shadows. Her breathing was shallow but stable. He brought water to her lips. She drank weakly. "Thank you, human," she murmured. "My name is Elias," he said. "And who? Who are you?" She hesitated. Then her voice echoed softly. "I am Araloon, princess of the skyborn giants." Elias felt the weight of her words settle on him like a mountain. A princess, a giant princess, hunted, wounded, and now hidden in his barn of all places. Footsteps thundered outside. Elias stepped forward to peek through a crack in the wood. The high chief himself had arrived, his dark horse snorting smoke as if it shared its master's fury. Warriors spread across the ranch, scanning the land with cruel intent. A spear struck the ground near Elias's foot. The chief rode up, eyes burning. "We hunt a giant," he growled. "A dangerous creature. Did you see anything fall from the sky?" Elias steadied his shaking hands. "No, chief, just another quiet night." The chief stared at him, long, deep, suspicious. Then he barked orders, sending his men to search the perimeter. They found nothing, not a footprint, not a trace. When they finally departed, Elias collapsed against the barn door, chest heaving with the breath of a man who knew he had just risked everything. Inside, Araloon opened her eyes. "You risked your life," she whispered. Elias chuckled weakly. "Well, everyone deserves help. Doesn't matter how tall they are." For the first time, the giant princess smiled, a small, exhausted curve of her lips that glowed faintly in the darkness. "You will be rewarded," she murmured. "My father, my tribe, they will come." Elias shook his head. "I'm not doing this for a reward." She closed her eyes, peaceful now. "I know. That's why your reward will be greater than anything you can imagine." But Elias didn't understand, not yet. As the stars shimmered overhead and the valley returned to its quiet, Elias couldn't shake a strange feeling. A feeling that his life had just shifted. A feeling that tomorrow would not be the same as today. He had no idea how true that was. Because by sunrise, his entire world would change. Forever. The first light of dawn crept, slowly across the valley, painting the dry fields in shades of pale gold. Elias Rourke had barely slept, every sound. Every flicker of movement in the night made him jump. He had never hidden anyone from the High Chief's riders before, let alone a wounded giant princess wanted by an entire war tribe. His muscles were sore from lifting her, his mind exhausted from fear. And yet something in his chest felt strangely hopeful, as if last night had opened a door to a world he had never imagined. He stepped outside with a cup of bitter black coffee. The morning breeze was crisp, brushing through the wheat stalks. The ranch was still quiet, too quiet. Even the birds seemed hesitant to sing. Elias looked toward the old barn, the place where the princess slept. Is she still alive? He wondered. Did the wound worsen overnight? He pushed himself forward and walked to the barn. Inside, Araloon lay curled beneath the blankets and hay, her breath slow but steady. The faint glow that pulsed from her wound had dimmed, which he hoped was a good sign. When he knelt beside her, her amber eyes fluttered open. "Elias," she murmured. "They did not find me." "Oh, no," he whispered. "But they'll be back. You need to be gone before—" His voice stopped, because the ground trembled. Not softly, not like the High Chief's riders last night. This was different. Heavier, deeper, older. A long rolling quake that shook dust from the rafters and rattled every plank of wood in the barn. Elias scrambled to his feet, nearly dropping the lantern in his hand. Outside, the sky darkened, not with clouds, but with shadows. Towering shadows. He rushed out of the barn and froze. Across the horizon, enormous silhouettes rose like marching mountains, giants, dozens of them, armor shimmering like the surface of a sunlit river. Their footsteps cracked the earth with every step. Birds fled from the trees. The very air vibrated with their approach. At their center walked a single figure, twice as tall, twice as radiant. A king among giants. His golden hair flowed behind him, and each breath he released seemed to warm the wind. Elias whispered, "Good Lord." The giants approached the ranch with thunderous strides. They did not come quietly, they came like a storm reclaiming its lost lightning. Then the giant king spoke. "Bring forth the mortal who saved my daughter." His voice boomed across the valley, echoing for miles. The cattle panicked inside the pen. Elias clutched the barn door to steady himself. Never in his life had he heard such a voice, so ancient, so commanding, so filled with emotion. Behind him, Heirloom tried to stand. Elias rushed back inside to help her.
"You don't have to."
She shook her head gently. "My father must see you as you are, honest, brave human." She pushed herself upright, leaning heavily on the barn wall. He wrapped her injured arm around his shoulder and guided her outside. The moment she emerged, the giants fell silent. The king stepped forward, his golden eyes softening with overwhelming relief. "Heirloom, my child." Heirloom took a shaky breath. "Father, I'm alive because of him." She lifted a giant hand and pointed to Elias. Dozens of giant faces, some carved with war paint, some wearing helmets of shining metal, others adorned with ancient braids, turned to look at the tiny human standing beside their princess. Elias felt smaller than ever, like a grain of dirt beneath the shadow of a mountain. The giant king lowered himself, slowly, respectfully. His massive knee pressed into the soil with a quake, and he bowed his head. "To you, Elias Rourke," the king thundered. "The skyborn giants owe a debt no treasure can measure." Elias's throat tightened. I just did what was right." But before the king could respond, hooves thundered in the distance. The high chief's riders were returning. Dust rose across the ridge as dozens of armored horses charged toward the ranch. Spears glinted. Shields slammed against saddles. War cries filled the air. Elias's blood turned cold. "They're back. And they're angry." Heirloom's eyes ignited with fury. "They will not cage me again." The giant king rose to his full colossal height, towering above the valley like a living mountain. When he spoke, the ground vibrated. "Stand down, humans." But the chief did not stand down. He charged forward, spear raised high. "That giant belongs to us." The sky trembled. Heirloom stepped in front of Elias, shielding him with her massive body. She raised her hand and unleashed a surge of energy, a roar of ancient power exploding from her chest. A shockwave blasted outward like rippling thunder. Horses buckled. Men flew backward, tumbling like leaves in a storm. The chief crashed into the dirt, gasping.
"You dare attack a princess of the Skyborn?"
The king thundered. The chief spat blood but tried to stand. "She carries a map." "A map that lies," Heirloom roared. "You seek power, not truth." The giant king pointed at Elias's ranch, the broken fences, the collapsing roof, the dying fields. "The man who protected my daughter is drowning in debt because of your merciless taxes, because of your greed." The chief swallowed hard, fear creeping into his eyes. "You have gold," the king continued. "You have cattle. You have stores of grain hidden beneath your council hall." He leaned forward, eyes burning like molten light. "You will repay him. Every coin, every debt, today." The chief trembled. "Every debt?" "Yes," the king snarled. "Your tribe will restore what you stole." And so began a transformation Elias could not comprehend. Within hours, warriors unloaded crates of gold bars, sacks of silver coins, baskets of grain, jars of medicine, and bundles of fresh lumber. Craftsmen repaired his barn, replaced the roof, mended every fence. Riders brought 20 cattle to restock his herd. Younger warriors signed a parchment declaring, "All debts of Elias Rourke paid in full. No claim shall ever be made against this land again." Elias stood speechless as the impossible unfolded before him. The chief, shaking with fear and humiliation, was forced to hand Elias a ceremonial staff, a symbol of protection that meant no tribe, no warrior, no ruler could harm him or lay claim to his home. He could barely breathe. Everything he had feared for years, every bill, every threat, every sleepless night, vanished in a single afternoon. The giants had saved his life in return for saving theirs. When the work was done, the giants gathered to leave. The giant king placed a hand over his heart and bowed, a gesture no human had ever witnessed. His voice softened. "Elias Rourke,